the main entrance of the White House. And I said to myself, this is sort of amazing. Or you walk into Air Force One. It's like a surreal experience in a certain way, but you have to get over it.
7:51, Stephen Roberts, the best in the business, ABC News political analyst from Washington, D.C. We got plenty of stuff to talk about. Good morning, Stephen Roberts.
Hey, McGraw.
What do you make of Donald Trump's tweeting about the so-called judge and the criticism from his own party for saying we're as bad as Vladimir Putin?
Well, look, on the law, the president probably has a reasonable case. The law gives presidents wide latitude to set rules on immigration. Now, they're not dictators. President Obama ran into federal resistance by federal courts on some of his immigration orders. But the personal attack on the federal judge as a so-called judge, this is, after all, a judge who was appointed by a Republican president, approved 99-0 by the Senate. It sends shockwaves through a lot of Republicans, a lot of conservatives who say, does this president understand the rule of law? Does he understand the separation of powers? Now, of course, as a candidate, he attacked a federal judge who had ruled against his business interests and implied the judge could not be fair because his parents had come from Mexico. But that was as a candidate. As a president, your words carry so much more weight. And New York Times this morning made a very interesting point. They said, this is only the first of what could be many years of legal battles between Trump and the federal judiciary, because Democrats have very little political power in Washington. Filibusters about their only little piece of leverage. Federal courts could, over the next few years, be extremely important. This is only the first of many potential battles between the Trump administration and the federal courts.
What do you make of the stories? I can't remember if it was the Washington Post or the New York Times where I read it, but the stories of him spending more time picking out the drapes than reading intelligence briefings and signing executive orders without reading it, and putting Steve Bannon on the National Security Council without reading it, and yet spending more time making sure which curtains he likes in his residency.
Look, I want to be careful here because I think the president deserves a certain amount of respect and a certain understanding that anybody who's new to a job is going to have fits and starts. I also think that there are a great many people in St. Louis and around the country who are cheering his initial initiatives. But I got to tell you, there are a whole lot of people in this city, including a lot of Republicans, who are deeply alarmed at the first few weeks, not just because he doesn't seem to respect the law, but because of the question that you and I have talked about many times, McGraw. And that's a question of judgment. That's a question of temperament. You got to remember, more than 60% of the people who voted last fall had questions about Donald Trump's temperament. Now, a certain number of them voted for him anyway. They voted for him because they liked his attitude. They hated Hillary Clinton. They wanted change. They didn't want another third term for the Democrats. I mean, there are a lot of reasons why they swallowed their doubts. One of my questions this morning is, what do those people think? Have they been reassured by the behavior of the president over the first few weeks, or have they been alarmed? And I can tell you, there are a lot of people, including a lot of Republicans, who are deeply alarmed by this hypersensitivity to criticism, this impulsiveness that they're seeing in the first few weeks of the Trump administration.
What do you make of the amount of leaks that's coming out of the White House? People on both sides of the aisle and the media say it's unprecedented, the people who are talking off the record.
Well, I think this is a result of two factors. One is that I think even people who have been appointed by Donald Trump find it hard to talk to him, find it hard to get his attention. So one way, and this is an old story in Washington, one way to get the president's attention is to leak a story because you know he's going to watch CNN, right? And so this is a way that people communicate with him. But I think the other factor here is you got to remember the political appointments in any administration are a tiny, thin crust on the top of a vast bureaucracy. And there are a lot of people who have devoted their lives to federal government, who are there, administration after administration, who are deeply upset by some of the president's attitudes. You look at the State Department, to take one example, where dozens, maybe hundreds of professional diplomats have filed grievances and made protests through what is called this dissent channel, a well-established route that folks in the State Department can register their unhappiness. And so a lot of the people in this bureaucracy have a lot of incentive to try to fight back against an administration that they think in foreign policy and domestic policy is violating a lot of norms. And you just look at this question of attitudes toward federal judges. I promise you, there are a whole lot of professional Republicans in the Justice Department this morning who are very upset with the president's words. One way to get back at him is to leak to the press.
Stephen Roberts, never a dull moment around here. We'll talk to you next Monday. ABC News political analyst. Have a good week, Stephen. 6:57, Big 550, KTRF.